And when I was using chemicals, I was the opposite of that. I was a terrible friend. I was irresponsible. I would lie to get out of trouble because I'd be in trouble for some reason, and we live in a very chemical culture. There's always this answer to, I've got a headache, take a pill, take an extra strength pill. I'm having a good time. Well, I'd have a better time if I had a beer in my hand or a drink or
So at the end of the day, we've just got to teach them how do you say no?
that's
How
right.
are you strong enough in yourself to know I don't need to go down that path because it is a slippery slope.
I'm Farah Shamas. Welcome to Hotel Talk. We hope you enjoy listening to this friendly conversation between people connected by real life in hotels.
Welcome back, everyone, to Hotel Talk. And today I have with us an amazing guest, an absolutely inspirational lady who I was so privileged to meet last year in London. We've stayed connected. Olga Valaglitz, if you're listening to this, thank you so much for introducing us and with the wonderful Creative Women platform. Heather Hayes is joining us on Zoom all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. She is so many things that I didn't even know how to sum it up, but we're just going to stick with mental health and addiction expert. She's also a clinician, and she's going to explain to us exactly what that is. And of course, an advisor, and herself is a survivor
Yeah.
of many turmoils and different parts of her life. So I can't wait to delve into this. This is going to be the first podcast I've done on this topic, and I think this is amazing, and we need more people like you, Heather, to be there to support so many others. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. And I'm so glad you're doing this because it's such an important topic. And I think it's really important globally that we really begin to take the stigma away from it all, too, and to know that there are very few families that don't have mental health or addiction issues in there. And so,
Exactly. And it's okay.
yeah. And how do we get into the solution? Because there are a lot of great solutions. And I think we hear a lot of, there's a lot of horrible stuff going on. There's a lot of death, there's a lot of suffering, but there are also a lot of people that are doing better and thriving and recovering. And so it's important to shed light on that too, to give the hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think, in the day and age that we live in with technology and so many pressures, social pressures, work pressures, fears, COVID, I mean, there's just so much going on, wars. It's just so difficult for so many. And I remember years ago, it was 1 in 5, it went to 1 in 4. Now it's 1 in 3, that will at some point suffer with, some form of mental health issues, and that's okay. And also more and more research is coming out all the time about how that can start not just from our DNA but from how our mothers were when we were in their womb. And there are solutions, but it's not always, there's no reason to assign blame or to feel ashamed of it. And I know that from this part of the world, I'm so happy to delve into this topic, especially knowing that a lot of our audience are from the Mediterranean, Middle East. There was a huge stigma around mental health, and people would consider your genes not being clean. So people wouldn't even marry others, if the family had, these associations. So let's start with you, Heather. Let's delve into from the beginning. If you can share a little bit about your own personal journey, how that led you into the field of addiction and mental health consultancy and advisory. What inspired you to pursue this role?
I love talking about it because I think it's important for me to share my story too, because I'm a woman in long-term recovery. I got sober. I went into treatment myself in 1982. So when you think about addiction, this is what it looks like. This is just
Yeah.
in remission. So I came from a very nice, sort of high-profile family. My grandfather was a United States senator. My parents, my father was a professor, wrote lots of books. I had this uncle who was the Latin American correspondent for the Huntley Brinkley show. And so a lot of work in the news media. My grandfather owned newspapers and television stations. So I grew up, well, and I went to private schools. I had a great education. So from the outside, I think my family life looked, sort of idealistic. On the inside, what I can tell you is that my parents divorced and remarried each other 3 times. It was very chaotic. They didn't just
Sorry. I need to stop here. Pause a minute. They divorced and married each other three
each other
times.
3 times.
Like they didn't divorce and marry someone else, and
Yeah.
then maybe no. Okay.
Each other. They finally
Okay.
did divorce. But as you can only imagine, it was quite chaotic. I mean, as a teenager, and I'm the oldest.
Definitely.
As a teenager, I was
And
just
the instability of that. Like, are they together? Are they not? Are they going to stay together? Are they not?
they'd have a fight, then they'd have a divorce, then they'd reconcile. We'd have to have a little wedding, and I have to stand there with my little flowers. It was like crazy, crazy. So when I was about 13 years old, and I had been sort of a shy, awkward, child and pre-adolescent, I went to my first party and someone offered me a drink. And then all of a sudden it was like the world opened up and the angels were singing. I mean, it was like this experience where suddenly I was like, oh my God, I'm not shy. I can talk to the boys. I feel like suddenly in this moment of numbing myself, I feel like everything's just kind of okay, which I think people who tend to be addicted or have substance use disorder, they can come back like I can and tell you exactly what that first time was like because it's so profound versus others that were like, who don't struggle, who say, well, I mean, I think I had one here,
Yeah. You can't remember so well. Like, oh, I was around the age of this, or
And so from there, it
that's
just,
so interesting.
yeah,
Yeah.
it exploded and it became like my coping mechanism. Like now, if I go to a party or I go out with my friends, instead of feeling awkward, I would have a drink. And then it moved to marijuana and then it moved to, other drugs, cocaine. It was a
Yeah, the stepping stone. That's what I've seen it so often with people I know, and people are like, oh, but what's wrong with this? Or what's wrong with, it might be the odd drink, it might be the odd spliff, or but I'm like, yeah, but they're stepping, if someone is in that mental state
right.
for whatever reason, that is a stepping stone. So it's not, oh, it doesn't matter. That's
Right.
going to lead them to look for the next kick.
That's exactly right. Because suddenly what used to be like, first it was like one drink did it, then I needed 2, then I needed 4, so then it was add some, other chemicals to it. So most of my story of being, my substance use disorder is that of a teenager because I got sober when I was 21. But I went off to university and, by then I was in so much emotional pain, but I didn't know how to make sense of it. All I knew was that I really liked numbing out. I couldn't call it numbing out. I'd tell you I was partying. I'd tell you I was doing just what all the other people around me were, which I probably was because a lot of them ended up in rehab too down the road. So yes, of course.
Maybe 20 years later.
Yeah, right. I worked at a facility and people would come walking down the hall.
Yeah.
Oh, you're here too. I'm like, well, actually I work here now, but good to see you. I'm glad you made it in the doors. But I started studying psychology and I thought maybe if I studied psychology, it would help me figure out why I couldn't stop drinking. I would drink and it was different. Like I'd black out. I wouldn't remember what had happened. I would change personalities. I had some really good, strong morals and beliefs. Like it's important to be a good friend. It's important to, be honest. It's important to really, try hard at things. And when I was using chemicals, I was the opposite of that. I was a terrible friend. I was, I was irresponsible. I would lie to get out of trouble because I'd be in trouble for some reason, and my parents would, I'd write checks, I'd overdraw my checks, at the liquor store, and then I'd tell them, oh, I'm going to be better. I'm just, I can't do math, it's just all the excuses that aren't me, So I can't say that I immediately changed my major and got better, but it did, a couple of years later, I finally reached out for help and said, I can't do it anymore. I can't live like this. And I checked myself into rehab, which at 21 in hindsight was really kind of divine intervention.
Really courageous as well, and very mature, like really mature to recognize that if you look back now and say, wow, I was a baby. Like you were the age that actually in the States, people are legally allowed to start drinking. And you were already like, no, I'm done with this.
I'm done with
this.
But
what do you think was the difference then between you and everyone else who was just partying? Like, what's the difference between what you went through or were feeling as opposed to people recreationally drinking and doing some drugs. Why did you recognize that you had a problem?
I think a lot of it was sort of this, what I call a loss of control. So I might have been able to go out and say, I'm going to have 2 drinks and have 2 drinks. And the next night, say, I'm going to have 2 drinks and have 2 drinks. And the next night, say, I was going to have 2 drinks and I have 10 drinks. And I didn't mean to have 10 drinks. And then I would, not remember what had happened. And so I'd say things that I wouldn't normally say to people. I'd do things, drive the car drunk, or, kiss guys I didn't want to be kissing, or what, so all these things. And then I'd sober up and I'd feel terrible about myself. And so I'd say, I'm not going to do that again. It's going to be different. And then it would be the same thing again. So I couldn't predict when I was going to use, how much, and I couldn't predict like my behavior when I was under the influence. And so I just really, I started just loathing myself. And the things that were important to me, like university and grades, I went to the wrong class. But not that I even went that much, for like half the semester. I showed up to take the midterm, and then I was like so nervy. I told the professor, I was like, you put the wrong number on the test. He's like, girl, I don't know where you think you are, but I'm not confused. This is, 203, and I thought it was 302. So, like just a train wreck. So he ended up adding me to that class. I got a D, and F in the class I never showed up for. It was a mess. And I'd had aspirations when I was younger of things I wanted to do in my life. And I also think, I did have some great mentors along the way, and I rode horses competitively. And, my relationship with the horses, and knowing that there was something that I loved and I felt good about, that gave me this glimmer of self-esteem in a world where I still felt awkward and uncomfortable, and like I didn't have self-esteem, kind of helped me pull through and say, something's got to get better. I literally at 21 was thinking, I'm not going to live past 25 if I keep going.
Yeah. You recognize that.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing, that you didn't like who you were, like in that state. So yeah, I think that's amazing. I told you when we met, I recently read Matthew Perry's book.
Yes.
And that was just such an amazing eye-opener. I think even more so that, of course, he's passed away since writing it. And when he did finish writing it, he was in a good place, but then how easy it was to slip back. And he explained in it, like, just how he was just he just couldn't. He just felt he didn't like himself. And imagine, and he had reached the level he'd reached. He was world famous. Lots of women found him, drop dead gorgeous. He had more money than he knew what to do with. And he was still like, I'm not good enough. And also his background, his family were, loving parents. They were divorced, but he had siblings, and it was enough to knock him. So it doesn't always have to be this huge, dramatic or horrific case that a lot of people think. It can be something smaller, but it's still significant to that individual.
Well, and it's like what you said in the beginning, nobody asked for it. And sometimes it's just the genetic throw of the dice. I do believe people with mental health issues, with substance use disorder, our brain chemistry is different for whatever reason. You can have 4 kids in a family, same parents, and 3 are fine and 1 has substance use disorder. So there's definitely that genetic part of it. There's also the environmental part of whether you've experienced trauma or stress. But we all come into the world with different minds, different brains, different abilities to handle stress. So what might be painful to me, it doesn't bother someone else, and vice versa. We've all got different levels of resiliency. And so
exactly,
it's like you said, so important to, it can happen to anybody. It doesn't discriminate. And sometimes it's even harder when you've got all these things on the outside that look so good. It makes it harder to say, underneath all this, I should feel like I live a charmed life, but I'm suffering and I'm struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, well, I think we just covered a lot of like the common misconceptions, but maybe you could just delve into it a bit more, because there's so much more to this topic. So what are some of the most common misconceptions that people have about addiction, and maybe even more importantly, recovery?
Absolutely. I think for me, even when I went into treatment, I was young. There weren't a lot of facilities, and I ended up in a facility. I'm a 21-year-old college student. I ended up in a facility that specialized in treating addicted physicians, dentists, doctors, pilots, and attorneys. And that right from the beginning, initially I was like, oh, I'm too young. I'm in the wrong place. There's been a big mistake here.
Yeah.
But then it helped me to really see, for me at 21, like I was in so much pain. Like, thank God I hadn't lost my medical career. I hadn't lost my, family, my husband, because I didn't have one. So some of the misconceptions I think that beginning for me helped me to realize is that, even in my mind, we think of people who are addicted, we think they drink every day, or they're using illegal drugs, or they're homeless, or they have all kinds of consequences, or they're not functional. And what I know is that the majority of the people, 93% of the people with substance use disorder, are functional. They are lawyers, they are our grandparents, they are doctors, they are mothers, they are school teachers, they are, construction workers, they are politicians, actors. And a lot of people don't use every day. So a big piece of what needs to happen is for us to begin to do a better job educating people of what addiction looks like. And how do you recognize it? And how do you recognize it in your friends and your family? And how do you recognize it in yourself? We live in a very chemical culture. There's always this answer to, I've got a headache, take a pill, take an extra strength pill. I'm having a good time. Well, I'd have a better time if I had a beer in my hand or a drink, or, and so we're kind of primed towards, chemical action. That's sort of the ideology of it all is, you have chemicals make everything better.
And it makes other people feel better about themselves, because if they're drinking a glass of wine, they don't want to be out with two people who are, teetotal. They're like, no, you have one too.
That's right. Exactly. And so I think a piece of it starts with our youth, because, here in the United States, we have such an epidemic of overdoses from opiates. And I mean, like 200,000 people a year. I mean, it's a huge percent of the population, and it's just so unacceptable. And again, in our schools, we have tornado drills, we have fire drills, we have active shooter drills.
I mean, that I still as a European, I just can't, and no one in Europe, we can't get our head around this. How yes, for natural disasters we get, but for something that is completely avoidable, it's insanity.
Yeah, it is insanity. And so
insanity. Why would you allow that? I just don't get it.
Yeah, the culture that our children grow up in. I mean, that in and of itself is stressful and traumatic. Yeah. And so, but yet
you go to school and you might die. Like that is it, right. That's a normal. I mean, I think was it something like 2,000 shootings? I can't remember, a year or something. It's insane.
It's insane. And so, in our schools, we don't do addiction drills because overdose of our teenagers is more likely to kill a child than a shooting or a tornado or a natural disaster or a fire, and so we've got to do a better job of teaching our families, how do you talk about substance use disorder? How do you talk about mental health issues around the dinner table?
Yeah. And how do you say no? You are going to be offered this. That's what I say with, friends of mine. I mean, I have 3 children, and everyone's like, oh, I hope that, they say about their own kids that they don't mix in the wrong crowds. And I'm like, what's the wrong crowd? They might be with the nicest people in the world who have an addiction.
That's right.
And my thing is that, no, my kids, 100%. I mean, I'm sure if they're sociable children, they're going to be around at one point in their life. And that can just be alcohol, for God's sake, that is legal. It could be drugs that they sell over a counter. It could be opioids. It could be cocaine. It could be whatever. So at the end of the day, we've just got to teach them, how do you say no?
That's
How
right.
are you strong enough in yourself to know I don't need to go down that path, because it is a slippery slope.
It
You know, it
is. And how do
starts
you,
off with just a harmless,
yes.
I'll
And how
make
do you
my
have
friend feel good. Yeah.
transparency about it? Like, how do you talk to your kids about it? And how do they talk to us about it and say, hey, kids are going to experiment.
Yeah.
So it's important to talk to them about how to do that safely and what that looks like and why it's important, because the brain doesn't develop until you're older to not
Mm.
pour chemicals on top of your brain. I mean, it's all really important information to be sharing with them, because they're in a culture, they're in an environment where there's a lot of stress, a lot of
Yeah.
and so how do we also help them to recognize when it's a problem in their friends, a problem in themselves, and to talk about it and feel like someone's not going to get in trouble?
Yeah. Sorry, and we're talking about that, and we have all my children around
All
us
your
now. So
children.
if you're listening, I'm terribly sorry for all the disturbances. But that's how we multitask in the modern day world.
That's right. Working women.
Working women, what can we do? This is the reality of it.
That's right.
So, okay, so we've touched now on families, and I love that, because I really want to get into how can we approach families with individuals struggling, because the stigma then goes on into families. And we know, I mean, in psychology, of course, everybody has a role in our house, and kids are assigned that, children are assigned that by parents before they've even developed their character. They might say, oh, have a son, he's going to be cheeky. I've got a daughter, she's going to be good at the
Right.
gym or whatever. And
Right.
so when people go out of that role, it's sometimes, the family structure can't even take it. If you're the late one and you start turning up on time, doesn't happen. Same
Right.
thing with if they're likely to be, addicted, or if that's how someone sees them. So, I
Right.
mean, how do you deal with that? Because, well, what is the best way? I mean, if parents can't accept it, there's just so many layers to this. So, yeah, give us some advice of what you've seen.
Absolutely. Well, families are all affected generationally by mental health and by substance use disorder. Like, if we sit down with families and do a family tree, and we color in, blue for trauma, red for addiction, green for mental health or disorders,
It's
it
going to look like a Christmas tree.
it lights up. And so in that, even if someone's not using substances in their generation, they're still affected by it. They're still impacted by it. And families work like systems. So there's a balance and a homeostasis to how families work.
Mm.
And there was a woman named Sharon Wake Shutter Cruz who gave this beautiful metaphor I love. And she talked about families and systems and how it's like one of those mobiles with the sticks and the strings and the butterflies. And when the wind comes, it blows things around like change. And so the
Mm.
family members are like the butterflies, and the sticks and the strings are those family rules, as she called them, that hold us together, our values, what's important to us. How do we talk about problems? How do we talk about feelings? How do we communicate with each other? Do we do it directly or do we do it behind each other's backs? And so, what she said is, when you have mental health issues or trauma, eating disorder, substance abuse in a family, it's like putting a paper clip on one of those butterflies.
Butterflies.
It throws it all off. And what ends up happening is the other family members take on roles, like putting on their own paper clips to balance it out. And then it becomes more rigid, more inflexible. So often you'll have a kid who comes into the family and they're like that, if the family system is rigid, they're the good kid. They're the family hero. Oh, little Billy is so great. He's athletic. He makes good grades. He this and that. And then often, if it's that rigid, the good kid role is already taken. So the next one comes in and says, all right, the good kid role is taken. He gets all
Yeah,
the,
I need attention.
let me
What am
give
I
you
going to do?
a bad child. Like, here I am,
Yeah.
I'll take
Yeah.
that role. And then often you'll have one who comes in and says, well, it's so tense in here, I'm going to lighten it up. I'll be the class clown of the family.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have one that ends up being what we almost call the lost child, who's like, gets reinforced for that. Oh, little Jenny is so sweet. She's quiet. She sits in her room. She reads. She never bothers anyone. So part of it is really beginning to look at, how do we communicate with each other? How do we talk? How do we problem solve? Like, it starts with us as parents taking a look at ourselves and looking at what we grew up with. And just because we grew up knowing what we didn't want doesn't mean we know how to do things or what we do want. And then to begin to talk to our children, when we, when we're worried about them, when we set boundaries and they don't respect the boundaries or follow the boundaries, or they seem to be struggling, then to be able to talk with them about it and know that it's okay to seek outside help. We don't have to be expert in our own children and our kids and mental health. We're not prepared to do that. And that's where consulting with an outside person can really be helpful. I mean, if our kid has an earache, we don't just go, oh, let me look at it. I think it's okay. We go to the doctor. And so there are experts that can help with that, before it really starts to get out of hand.
I agree. And also as a parent, we're not supposed to be all the roles. We're just supposed to be their parents. We're supposed to protect them and love them,
Right.
and allow the kids to grow into whoever they're meant to be.
Right.
And there's so many experts out there who can help us do that job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to say about families too is that families are the most important and the most motivating for someone getting healthy. Like people, I come in, I work with a lot of families where there's a family member who doesn't want help or says they don't have problems. The other family sees it. It's all chaotic. And the reason I can't just come in as an expert and have a conversation and say the right words and get them to say, oh, I'll go get help, because I mean nothing to that person. What matters to people the most are family and family connections.
Yeah.
So,
I love you. I'm proud of you.
yes,
There's some words that
I'm scared.
people spend their whole life just waiting to hear.
That's it. Or I'm scared. I'm worried about your behavior. So I come in and I ask about, I come in and I work with the families to help them look at themselves, look at changing, talking to their loved one in a way that's positive and helps motivate them to change, because families are going to be around long before families have been around long before and will be around long after, mental health care professionals. And so if we can get the whole family to begin to shift and change, we can change that narrative. Like some of the most powerful families I've worked with, grandmother goes and gets help. And she does that. A lot of people will go, oh, well, she's 80. Why make her go get help now? Because the family legacy doesn't have to be grandmother died of alcoholism. It can be grandmother had difficulties. She went and got help and she made those changes. Knowing that her children, her grandchildren, her unborn great-grandchildren were all susceptible to this. And it shows we can get help in our family when we need it.
Yeah, lead by example as well. And just be that role model and have those extra years. You might be 80. Why die at 81? Why not live to 100?
Exactly.
Go get the help and feel like a new person. Get your life back.
That's right.
And I have friends who don't remember half of it. Like they drink and every time they just black out, And it's a madness that, one friend's still single and because she literally can't remember ever meeting someone. She's met hundreds,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, I'm like, come on. Like, it's just, yeah.
And it's lonely. It's lonely, isolated way to live. And that's what happened. The chemicals or the mental health issues push people away, and you end up yourself in the bottle or yourself in the drug, yourself in your and no one else is able to get in. And we need connection, particularly women. We heal through connection. No one heals in isolation.
I want to go back to your story.
Yeah.
You were so young. You got clean.
Yep.
You were only 21 and you could do anything. You were, from, I don't want to use the Cypriot word now, like a good family, but a connected family. You were comfortable and you could have gone on to do anything you wanted. Why did you dedicate your life to this when you could have done anything? Why was this so important to you, having gone through this at such a young age?
Once I started to really clear up my brain, really start to see things more clearly, it was probably, it was about a month or so into my treatment, into my care. And suddenly I knew, like I'd never known anything else in my life, that I wanted to help people. And back then I particularly wanted to help teenagers like myself who were, who were overlooked. I mean, one of the first family sessions I had with my parents when I was in treatment, I said to them, why didn't you do anything? Why didn't you do, I was
Mm.
16, I was having car wrecks. I was getting kicked out of private school. Like, why didn't anybody step in? And, on the one hand, they didn't know back then to do it. But I thought, I was in so much pain. I want to do whatever I can to help others. And so
And a lot of it is attention, like a lot of it is running away, escapism, but a lot is like there. It's a bit like, well, hello everyone, I rolled up really late, or you saw the vomit there, or someone come and help me.
right, someone come and help me. I am out of control and I can't stop. And so once I kind of made that shift, then I just became hungry for knowledge. So I, finished up my undergraduate degree. I went off to graduate school in Boston back in the 80s. I took every training I could get. I have been able to train with some of the best people in the industry, in the field, in family therapy, in addiction, in eating disorders, in ways to help work with people who are resistant. And, that's been important to me too, is to always stay curious and keep learning. I came back to Atlanta from graduate school and I was in private practice for a long time. Loved it. Worked a lot with teenagers. Loved it. Families, children, got trained in play therapy. And then right around the turn of the millennium, I really decided, I just wanted to do something a little more, have a little different impact. And so I started what I do now in my company, which was going in and really working with whole families and changing the whole, coming up with concierge sort of care plans for the entire family system in ways that it's sustainable so that everyone's getting help. Because what I learned over time too is if mom or dad or an alcoholic, they go get help, that's amazing. And it begins to change the trajectory. But the kids have struggled, the spouse has struggled, the parents have struggled, and they all need help too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all part and parcel of the same family. And, if there's a mom who's an alcoholic and she clears up, that's amazing. But in the meantime, how many years were her children witnessing that? And what's to stop them to say, well, when mommy got stressed, she reached for the vodka. I'm going to do the same. And I mean, I've read so many autobiographies where, that's what happened. Like people were just like, oh, we saw grown-ups getting stressed and they had a drink. I'm going to do the same.
I'll do the same. That's how we celebrate, or that's how we problem solve. Right. And it's so important because, families need to know, we only have a certain number of coping skills and they'll work until they don't work anymore. And sometimes they don't work anymore because the world changes. Like now we've got all this technology and kids are meeting, it used to be when we were young, we learned how to have a conversation by you talk. Now it's my turn to be quiet and listen to you. Now it's like we're texting away. So things change and we have to learn new ways to adapt. Parents all, families come from a place of love and good faith. And when things don't work, it doesn't mean it's not about love. It just means that it's trickier. Mental health, addiction play by different rules. So what might help someone who's struggling with a physical health illness like diabetes doesn't work with someone who's addicted. So it's important to help families just learn and have those tools and not feel badly about the fact that we don't.
Absolutely.
Oh,
we've covered so many things here. Yeah, tell me.
One other thing you reminded me of, I think is so important, like the mother who's an alcoholic and she comes back and she's sober, for example. The other thing is that's so important about being in recovery is taking that accountability and that responsibility. And for, one of the most beautiful things that can happen when a person's ready is that they're able to sit down with their loved ones, their children, their spouse, their parents, and say, I'm sorry. Like, I see how this impacted you and affected you. And I hate that I hurt you. And I'm really sorry. And I want you to know that. And it wasn't okay. And I'm working really hard every day to live a new life where I don't do those things again. And that beauty in the repair helps change things for children too, or for spouses,
Yeah, learning to say I'm sorry. It's very powerful.
Making amends for those things. And as a person, when I did that, I felt better about myself. There was a freedom to it. I didn't have to feel like an angst when I was around someone, or, oh, do they remember such and such, or what about, it's like it gives you that sort of new freedom, and it unchains you from the kind of bondage of the past.
You're reminding me of all these different books I've read, and I read one, I'm trying to look it up now, last year, which was written by a lady writing about her addiction, overcoming it, specifically with alcohol and I can't remember other drugs. And she was very anti the AA, saying that it didn't help her, that it was written by men for men, that it's outdated, and how, there are so many other better methods and methodologies for, this was it. Do you know Holly Whitaker?
The name is familiar, but I'm familiar with.
Yeah, I read her book. It's called Quit Like a Woman. Yes. And it was very powerful, but she read it herself. I listened to it, and you could still sense this like hyper energy, but like almost bitterness. Like she was like upset that she had to like go through all these failed attempts that were just not designed for her or women like her.
There's a huge gap. It's closing in some, but the way we started doing treatment in the United States, and again, at the time, it was important. There was a research project that was done that began to lay out the signs and symptoms so we could identify what alcoholism looked like and look at the recovery process. But the study was based on 200 white men. And so there was a woman.
And their brains are different. Like it's proven now. We've got different brains, like full stop. We have different behavioral patterns. Our neural pathways are different. Our hormone levels are different, everything.
Yeah. So a woman named Stephanie Covington came in and said, hold on, this isn't how women heal. And she did write some books like The Women's Way Through the 12 Steps, and really took a look at how it's not linear for us, and we think in a certain way. And then there was a theory of healing called relational cultural therapy that came out of the Stone Center in Wellesley, Massachusetts, that worked a lot with trauma. But it also said women heal differently. Women heal in relationship, in connection. So men would go to treatment and they'd say, okay, you can't use the phone for 2 weeks, focus on yourself, and for them, maybe that helped because it got them out of the work.
Great. Out of the stress. And also that, without being rude now, they can't multitask as well. They're just dealing with one thing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Women
have got, wait a minute, I can't not talk to my children for 2 weeks. It's not even healthy for the children to not talk to me, or women feeling like if I go get help, someone's going to think I'm a bad mother, or, so how do we help come in, support women, really help them heal in a way where they're connected? And then when they go in for treatment, it's so different. Every woman that goes into treatment should be having a hormone test. They should be looking at, other issues as well, thyroid, autoimmune disorders, in addition to the substances or the eating disorder or the depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder.
Oh my goodness. As you say, it's all individual as well. I had one friend who already had an eating disorder along with, other complications and addictions, went for rehab, and they put her in the anorexic group, let's say, but that she really needed help with her addiction at the time. And they gave her like what was more food than the anorexics were used to eating, or the eating disorders. But that was less food than she was already eating, and she already had an eating disorder. So she ended up losing more weight in rehab, coming out like sick, and, feeling terrible, undernourished. And so this is where like your approach is so, so important. It's so individual to, to people and their own circumstances and their own bodies.
That's right. Because even though there's some themes and some symptoms, everyone's individual, everyone, and they, there shouldn't be a cookie cutter answer, because there isn't.
Exactly. One size fits all. It doesn't happen.
Not happen. Right. Right.
No. And so what are some of the best therapies that are out there now, or that, are new, or that you'd suggest, or that works for clients that you work with?
So a lot of it depends on where you're at in the progression. Are you in early stage, middle stage, late stage? Like, one of the reasons I love intervention is because we want to try and get in and help people early on when others are seeing it and they maybe can't see it
Mm,
themselves. But there are a lot of really good evidence-based treatment modalities out there where we're looking at treating the trauma, treating the brain, helping rejuvenate, your thinking, your thought process, different ways of looking at helping with the depression. So with substance use or eating disorder, you've got to get the chemicals out, but then you have to go underneath and really look at what are the issues that were driving that and what are the other issues that are connected. Because rarely is
mm,
someone just an alcoholic. Often they're an alcoholic and they've got trauma, or they grew up the child of an alcoholic, or they've got depression, or they were date raped when they were 16, or other issues in there that have caused them all of that pain. So with mental health, things have changed a lot too. It used to be when people went for mental health treatment, the only things available really looked like psychiatric institutes, and they were scary, and they were uh, really kind of brutal. Like, as a clinician, I
yeah,
going on those. But today they're lovely healing
yeah. Do you
centers.
remember the movie Gia, I think, about the model? Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
yes, or
Horrific.
one flew over the cuckoo's nest, or so there are a lot of places now that are, because the environment's so important. There are a lot of places to get help that are in beautiful homes, look like
Mm,
residents, look like, I mean, it's like going to a healing retreat,
mm,
instead of going to a hospital. But they can
yeah.
come in and provide the medical care, because some people do need, it's hard on bodies. It's harder on women's bodies and men's bodies.
Hmm.
Often people,
Yes, exactly. And the knock-on effect of addiction or eating disorders or whatever else is huge.
yeah,
So they also need, yeah,
yeah.
assistance.
So imagine people having spaces to go to heal from their addictions, or their mental health issues, that were as beautiful as your resort.
Mhm.
And they're places
Yeah.
that come in and do, you know, let's eat, let's look at nutrition. Let's look at your, mindfulness and meditation. Let's look at self care. Let's look at spirituality, so that the physical health,
Mm.
the mental health, and having those calm, beautiful surroundings
Yeah.
there,
Holistic approaches.
holistic. And then, to be able to go in and, recreate and refine that passion. When, for me, I was in such an existential angst. Like, I spent most of my, and I was already a wondering child. Like, as a child, I would sit and ask questions like, why are we
Yeah.
here? And what's the meaning of life? And which is kind of not normal for an 8-year-old. But I guess when your parents are so chaotic, you're trying to figure out, like, again, why is there so much pain in this world that I live in? Why do I hurt? And how do I make meaning out of that? And so it's so important that we all find that meaning. Like, what is my purpose? What am I here to do with my life? How do I feel good about that? And what am I passionate about? How do I have those things in my life so I feel fulfilled? And I know that again, I'm not just bobbing along like a cork on the ocean, whatever comes its way. Life is just but to really come in and reclaim and have an environment where I learn to, for some people, it's just watching the sunrise in the morning that gives them that connection to the earth. For others, it's helping. For others, it's being able to use their brilliant minds to develop an entrepreneurial business, or or to have those moments where you connect with your kids and have those rituals where we every night say good night and I love you and be kind and have a kind heart, whatever that is, for
Mm.
us to be able to come back and have a safe space to find that.
I love that. Yeah. Ah, so let's talk about technology. With the rise of technology and social media, I mean, you must see so much. I mean, how has that impacted mental? Well, I mean, how has that? I don't know where even start and end with this question, but how has it impacted addiction and mental health in general? Because I mean, we can see it really has, and I feel so sorry for the kids now. I really do. It's a different world.
It's a different world. On the one hand, I mean, I have to start by saying, there's a lot of good from social media. There are a lot of kids out there advocating for, not bullying and connecting and all of that. But the downside, first off, we don't even know or have enough research to understand what screens do to immature young brains. And most kids, by one, are already looking into a screen. By 3 or 4, they know how to navigate it.
100%. My 5-year-old is amazing at games. I just can't even believe it.
Right. I mean, I have to go to the little ones to say, show me how to take a panoramic picture.
I know.
But then also, there's so much pressure. I mean, you've got influencers out there that our kids look up to, who are either living these like
unrealistic lives,
unrealistic
fake lives,
all about.
I know influencers who are depressives, who
Yes.
are even suicidal, not
Yes.
well, and the pictures are glamour, they are beauty, they are living the life. I know influencers have financial difficulties. They're not, living the life, but they show like it's
everything's okay.
fake.
And it's all about how many likes I get.
Yeah.
And the other piece, that happened, I think, was social media. The platform is so big. So when I was a kid, if someone was bullied, it was, you had a bully, you had a person getting bullied, and you had a witness. Now the platform is never ending because cyberbullying, it's out there on the internet. Everyone sees it. People jump in. I mean, and people can be brutal because they hide behind their screens, and it's
exactly
just horrific.
Yeah, their own pain, their own issues, and then they put it on someone else. It's just, I think the big movement like now with Australia banning social media under 16. I know that there's talk, obviously in the States, there's been lots about Twitter. Europe, they're talking about it. I think really social media does have to be banned until, but then also where then do you draw the line? I mean, technically WhatsApp social media, but that's a messaging. But, it's also, you can bully on a WhatsApp group. Like
and I really do believe no matter what we ban, they're going to develop stuff to be able to go around it. I mean, there's so much savvy we are too. So, but it does add extra stress, extra pressure.
It really does.
Even down to, there's a type of trauma called vicarious trauma, which what that means is that I witnessed something and it's traumatizing to me. So it doesn't happen to me, but my seeing it is traumatic. And so today we have so much exposure. I mean, when I grew up in the 60s, the news was a guy talking for 30 minutes reporting, and that was it. Now,
you can see it anytime. I mean, we watched a genocide happen live recently. I mean, it's just crazy.
Yeah. All of that's out there. And then if kids go on the dark web, then there's even worse stuff. So that's traumatic too.
I will say this from my point of view as a mom of 3 young children. There's 2 things that you've touched on that I agree on, and I'll expand on it. I hope this is useful to the listeners. But with my children, I really try and first of all explain to them that, I try for them not to be on YouTube and everything else, but invariably they are going to be on a platform at some point in their lives, or when I'm not watching the phone or the iPad, they're going to see stuff that is, as you said, like traumatic for them, or they shouldn't see, or it's, God forbid, pornography or something else, or killings, and I tell them from now, look, you will be exposed to things that your brain cannot process. And it's not because there's anything wrong with you. It's not because you're behind or you're silly or you're incapable. You might just be 8 years old, and that's for an adult. You might be an adult and you cannot process it because you're sensitive or because you're more prone to empathy in that circumstance. So whatever it is, don't feel ashamed, and come and share it. Share it with your mommy, your daddy. Later on in life, share it with a friend and get that off your chest, and then we'll help you try and process that. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is, with my kids, like, they don't have, mine are nearly 12, 9 and 5. Obviously they don't have social media accounts, but because they see it all and they're like, oh, but I want a YouTube, I want a TikTok, I'm like, okay, well, you can do stuff on mine, and let's do a little reel together. But I'm in charge of that. And then I teach them, and they get bored. So we might do one every 3 months, but I'm like, okay, it's on. we've posted it, and they'll run up after 5, 10 minutes, 1 hour. How many people saw it? How many? And I'm like, no, that's it. We posted, we put the phone away, and we don't care how many people like it or view it. That's marketing. It is important. And I teach them the tricks like, okay, we want people to view it because later you'll have a company, hopefully, or work for someone and you'll need it. This is what we're doing. We've got to have this many hashtags. I mean, my background's marketing anyway. So we've got to do this. This is how we're going to write a thing. This is to keep people's attention. So I teach them all the tricks, not to be behind. But I'm like, but then you learn and you put it down and you say, I'm done. Because you're going to get addicted, and it's not your fault. It's because of how the screen is made to hit our dopamine levels and everything else. So I've explained all of this to them. So yeah, and then okay, it's still tough, but I was really proud of my son. Like 2 days ago, he went for a walk and he told his dad, Daddy, put your phone away. We're in nature. It's not the time.
Beautiful. I love that. I think that's such advice.
It's again, it goes back to being exposed to drugs, being exposed to other things. They will be exposed. It's just teaching them in advance, like how here's your grounding. This is how you're going to cope.
Yeah.
So Heather, just to start wrapping up,
yes,
what hope is there? Give us like some positivity, some success stories that you really remember.
So
something that resonates with you.
Absolutely. Well, one of the things that I talk about a lot here in the United States, the stats, we have 22 million people struggling with addictions. We have 23 million people in recovery, and that doesn't get talked about enough. And so there is so much help, so much hope, so much help. People are out there living very passionate, healthy lives, and they're recovering. They're recovering from, thought disorders, depression, substance use. And so I think, the media sensationalizes, and we do need to be aware of the dangers and what doesn't work. But what's so important, I mean, I have family members that still reach out to me decades later saying, I'm still sober. It's a beautiful thing. And so to have, one of the things that warms my heart more than anything, I'm going to have a client that I did her intervention about 12 years ago when she was young and in college, and she just had her first baby, and has got a beautiful degree, working as a nurse, helping others, and a gorgeous little family she's put together. And, that's what it's all about, is really watching people begin to heal. And from there, they help someone else, and that next person begins to heal. Or the family members who've gone through it that now feel like, one of the most powerful things that can happen is for someone to say to a friend or someone else, we have that in our family too. And that's what we did.
Be open.
Be open. Talk about it. That's where the healing lies. That's what really helps people.
Yeah, take away the shame.
Yeah, away.
Just that's one of my favorite quotes from Lion King, when Zazu says to Mufasa, "Don't worry, sire." It's Rowan Atkinson's voice. There's one in every family, sire. Two in mine, actually.
That's right. That's right. I did see on social media today a meme that said something like, someone asked me if mental health was driving my family crazy, and I said, no, we seem to be enjoying it. I mean, like we've all we've all got it. It's all there if you're human.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you're not, please write a book about it, because we don't hear enough about it either.
Seriously, and everybody has ups and downs in their lives. It's not all supposed to be rosy, and we need the low to appreciate the high, and vice versa. So
that's right. If you don't have the dark, you can't see the light.
Absolutely.
Life is hard. Life is unfair. But how do we navigate that? And how do we, get to an age in life, like, where I'm at, sober almost 43 years, at this age.
And looking fantastic for it. Oh my goodness. You don't look a day over 40.
Thank you. But looking back and also saying, okay, I feel good about what I did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Overall, maybe some things I would have changed, but I feel good about what I did. And that's,
that's what they say. You never regret what you did. You regret what you didn't do.
Yeah.
So you've got to do those things.
Thank you so much. I would love to come back on again and we can do some follow-up.
Thank you. Yes, we've got to do, we will do another dive deeper. So I'm going to end. I've got two last questions for you. One, we're talking about your quotes. What's your favorite quote?
Oh gosh, what is my favorite quote? One of my favorite quotes is that we keep what we have by giving it away. Meaning,
oh, that's lovely.
Meaning, I can only be who I am if I go and help others, and I'm only who I am because of the others that have helped me. I heard one of the most beautiful stories at the Creative Women's Conference where a woman was talking about the metaphor of a woman on a ladder, and we're reaching up as someone's helping pull us up, but we're also helping pull up the other, So, help others, stay humble. It's a spiritual gift to be here. And
absolutely. Absolutely. And then we have a tradition on this podcast where we have bonus questions where all the team at St. Raphael Resort and Marina get to put a question in the crystal bowl, and they don't know who's going to pull it out. So I've had to pull yours out for you, and they're always random questions, and yours is quite a simple one. What's your favorite flower?
My favorite flower, I love stargazer lilies. They're beautiful.
Oh, that's my mom loves those.
They're so beautiful. They're fragrant. They're colorful.
The big ones with the orange.
Big ones with the
Yeah. They stain. Those orange things stain, don't they? The pollen.
Yes. Which is a little beautiful. Bit like me. They're good, but there's always a little bit of a mess going on.
To appreciate the thorn, not just the rose, as the poet said. Heather, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. This has been so informative. Your story is absolutely inspiring. I hope you have many, many more years of sharing so much love and light with so many people. And we're going to put your contacts in the show notes. So if anybody wants to get in touch with you directly, they'll know where to come.
Thanks. Lots of love. I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button because it helps us more than you may realize. If you are planning on coming to visit us at St. Raphael Resort and Marina, feel free to email our reservations team quoting Hotel Talk and receive an exclusive offer just for you. We look forward to seeing you soon, hearing your feedback about our show, and producing many, many more interesting episodes just for you, our listener, and our valued guest in mind. Thank you so much, and take care.